Your analytics data is full of insights. Your CMS is full of content. You might know what's wrong with that content based on the analytics, but fixing it means context switching between a bunch of tools, manually updating dozens of pages, remembering SEO rules. And for a lot of teams, that's a very manual process that takes a long time or just simply doesn't get done at all. These insights just die in a dashboard somewhere. So we want to take a step further. We want to take these insights, feed them into some AI workflows, and then act on them with the Kontent.ai MCP server directly in the CMS. So let's jump right into it. You can see I'm in a Kontent.ai environment right now. Within this environment, I have a lot of articles and blog posts and content about Karma Health, a fictional health provider. I also have a custom application on the left here. And this custom application really is an iframe of a Retool app. Retool is a great platform for creating internal apps, creating workflows. And if you haven't checked them out, I definitely recommend it. Retool.com was a pleasure to work with that tool and create sort of a dashboard like this that I could frame in. So we have some mock analytic data here, and effectively we want to single out one of these items. Let's take a look at blog, AI, and care. And I've just set up this custom app, so I have the selected row data over here, and I have a button. And what this button is going to do is it's going to feed in this analytics data and kick off some subsequent workflows. So I'm going to start that now, and I'll pull up a little diagram of how this will work. So I have my page data in a database in Retool. I have that custom app hosted in Retool. I've framed it into Kontent.ai, the CMS, because I assume that somebody working in the CMS is going to have to act on this data. And from there, clicking that button kicks off a couple of different workflows. First, we're going to query Kontent.ai for the content item that is associated with that page path in our analytic data. And based on that response, we'll take that response, pass it into another workflow over here, pass that in with the analytic data, and run a prompt through ChatGPT 4o to provide me with suggestions to improve the content and improve some of those analytics that are associated with that particular page. The outputs of that will go back into my agent in the custom application. And that orchestration agent is what I'm calling it. We'll use Claude Sonnet 4 and the Kontent.ai MCP server to take those suggestions and actually make changes to the content in the CMS without me having to manually go and figure out all of the stuff I need to do to improve that piece of content. So this is the generalized workflow here. Let's go back to the application and see how our content coach is doing. It breaks down each of the steps. Here you can see that it kicked off content, find variant by slug, which is a workflow I have in Retool to go fetch the content item that has this AI in care slug associated with it. After that, it kicked off analyze data and make suggestions workflow that I have in Retool. Which is taking this analytic data here and the content within the content item and trying to evaluate what performance improvements can be made. So you can see that it has current performance analysis, and the agent is recommending improvements and assigning some priorities to these improvements. I actually want to take a moment here and go look at that workflow in Retool. This is finding that content item variant by slug. Really, this is just using the Kontent.ai management API endpoint, the early access endpoint, the variant filter endpoint. It's feeding in that page path URL slug and finding the content associated with that. The more interesting workflow is this one here that takes that mock analytic data, goes over to this Retool AI agent, which I've set up to use GPT-4o. And then I have a system prompt here that tells it it's an SEO specialist and it should take that variant data into account and provide me with suggestions in a structured format. And this will return that to that overall agent, that content coach agent that I've set up. So let's go back here. Effectively, this is the outcome of that workflow that I just showed. It has some changes to optimize metadata elements, integrate multimedia elements, add strategic CTAs. I'm just going to say here, let's implement the inline CTAs and add the metadata keywords that it suggested. So let's do that. That'll go through and use the Kontent.ai MCP server to make these changes. I'm going to wait a moment here. I've set up this agent to make me approve any of the tools that it's using with the MCP server, because I don't want it to just spin out of control and start approving things and maybe get stuck in a loop. So I've set that up here to have a human in the loop, have a little bit of control. So you see we're getting initial context with the Kontent.ai MCP server. This is helping the agent rationalize some of the terminology we use, some of the relationships that exist in Kontent.ai entities. That's just going to result in better outputs from the MCP server itself. We're going to approve get the variant mappy. It looks like it doesn't have all of the variant information from my previous workflow. So that's an optimization that I would want to make to my workflow approach to this agent in Retool. But that's okay. We can lean on the Kontent.ai MCP server to go fetch the appropriate variant. It's going to fetch it by ID, so it really shouldn't take that long versus trying to parse out the URL slug from the page path and all of that lifting that we did earlier in the workflow, the get variant workflow that we ran earlier. So it has the content variant data for this blog post. It has the IDs of the various elements across the blog post, which is great. I'm pretty confident it's going to upsert to the right elements within that content item. I'm not sure why this component is scrolling up to the top. I'm not a UX designer, but that's fine. We're in this to experiment with streamlining the workflow here. We can tweak the component details a little bit later. So it's thinking right now, and if I were to expand this, it's going to tell me the description of what it's doing, what it's fetched so far. It gives me a link to the log entry within Retool, which is a nice feature for that platform. Right, we are going to upsert the language variant. We're going to approve this tool. You could set up the agent to automatically approve these changes. I like to manually approve them, again, to make sure that it's not spiraling out of control or it's not doing anything that I don't want it to do to my content. Something that'll allow you to rest a little bit easier is if this tool saw that the content item was published and there was no draft, it wouldn't overwrite my published content. It would ask me to create a new draft and it would make its changes there. That way, my published public content is stable. It's not impacted by this MCP server or these changes. And I still get the benefit of the MCP server automating, creating a new draft, a new variant of this content. So let's go check out the content item that this analytics coach impacted. Let's take a look at these optimizations. It says it added some inline CTAs, 5 of them, and added some SEO metadata keywords, and then enhanced the metadata description as its first pass based on what I told it to do from the suggestions. So let's go to the content item inventory. You can see AI and care here. And if we have the click on the metadata tab for this content item, you can see there's a bunch of new keywords added here. There's a description, and let's check our content. There are 5 links. So I didn't give it specific instructions about what type of CTA, but it gave us 5 links to try and improve the call to action. As a human in the loop, I would want to go check where those CTAs lead to, make sure that they go to some relevant content. or actually further the user journey that we're trying to get our viewers to go on. But let's take a look here at the version history and see what changes were made from the old draft. So we can see here that these keywords were all added. There was nothing there before, so that's a vast improvement. And it looks like it was limited to the CTAs. So the other content that I had in place was kept intact, which is nice because my instructions didn't say anything about changing the bulk of the content. It was just approving those inline CTAs and improving this metadata. So far, so good. The coach did what I asked it to do, which is wonderful. One other thing I want to show in this demonstration is the configuration of the agent itself in Retool, just because this, I'm calling it the orchestration agent here, is a little abstract based on what I've shown so far. But in Retool, it's really nice. They give you this agents option where you build a new agent and you can provide it with instructions for its initial context. I just told it that it's an SEO optimization specialist, an orchestration agent that will trigger a couple workflows. I gave it some specific steps of how it should proceed through those workflows and use that information in order to improve the content. And then some MCP server considerations. So, for example, I don't want the MCP server or the MCP tool to run until the prior workflow steps are completed, because I want to make sure I have all the relevant IDs instead of making the MCP server run and ultimately fail. I provide some suggested output formats. I tell it to think hard. I like to add that to the end of my prompts. I'd rather have a good quality answer that takes longer rather than a fast one that's just incorrect. In Retool, you can select various models. I chose Claude Sonnet 4. It's just what I've had the best luck with thus far. And at the bottom, we add those tools we created, which is the find variant by slug workflow, analyze data and make suggestions workflow, and the content MCP server that was responsible for upserting that content back into the CMS. So that's it. Effectively, we took some mock analytic data, we ran it through an orchestration agent, which kicked up a couple of AI workflows. We got some AI suggestions on how to improve some of these stats and improve that content to improve these stats. And we used the Kontent.ai MCP server to effectively make those changes to the content items. So now teams can get unstuck with that first step in the process when they see, ooh, something's not performing well based on analytics. They can take that first step really quickly on getting some suggestions on how to fix it. And not only that, acting on those suggestions in a really streamlined fashion.